Hi, this is Pam from ROC Metaphysical. Hopefully you've seen some other videos, but this is about my magazine called ROC, which stands for Rochester. So it's ROC Metaphysical, all one word.com. It's an online magazine that has new articles the first of each month. And part of the magazine is interviewing people that are contributors or they've written a book, and I'm doing a book review. So this is about a book review. And I'm here with Judith, who's written a book about our relationship with trees, or how we should be more like trees, or we should know more about how trees are.
Okay, so the name of the book is called Why Can't We Be More Like Trees? And what the book is actually about is new narratives, new stories that are emerging from both science and religion that are helping us reframe the climate crisis in a positive way. And one part of that story that goes as a theme throughout the book is about trees and our deepening understanding of trees and forest communities, and our deepening understanding of how the idea of community, cooperation, and values expressed in nature, like kindness and healing, can help us move forward through this climate crisis that is really due to our creation.
Right. And I know I've read and seen videos about trees, and this is probably something you touch on in the book, is that trees talk to each other, which I was so surprised when I saw that, is that their root systems all intertwine with like maple trees. They're all together in an area, and so their roots are connected or are somehow able to communicate and tell the trees, each other what's going on.
That's right. They really demonstrate what it means to be a community. And it isn't just the trees and the tree roots of similar trees. It's everything that is a part of that forest ecological system. And in particular important are the fungi, because the fungi have this extraordinary symbiotic relationship with trees where they exchange information, they exchange food. I mean, fungi get their food from trees. Trees get it from photosynthesis. We're all dependent on trees and plants. We wouldn't be here otherwise, because that's the source of all our food. So fungi have developed this extraordinary complex relationship where they exchange for the tree's sugars. They bring the tree's minerals and proteins, water, information, even antibiotics. It's quite amazing. So that's a type of communication. Well, things that can help bring, yes, a type of chemical antibiotics that the trees can absorb through their roots. So they're really interactive community. Of course, that is a type of communication. Trees communicate in lots of other ways. One way is through the scents that they emit. When you walk through a pine forest, you can smell that wonderful pine smell. Well, that's a communication. And they have dozens and dozens of scents that are part of their scent language. So there are a number of ways in which they communicate with other trees and with other species.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess now when I go walking through a forest, I'm going to pay attention. If I notice that there's a different aroma, that, maybe one week it's this, it could be, weather dependent, or something's going on that, they're not happy, they're happy. I mean,
there might be less or more of the same type of scent that they're emitting. And sometimes they emit certain scents to warn other trees about certain types of predators, like there's an invasion of a certain type of insect. So they might even emit a certain scent so other trees can prepare certain defenses that they might have against that insect predator. So it's fairly complex.
Wow, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. And I guess you would step back, and do you want to talk a little bit about your environmental background so people understand how you know these things?
Well, I'm a big reader, first of all, and I read a lot of science material. I started out in the early environmental movement in the 70s, the master's degree in environmental studies from the University of Wisconsin. I worked in that field for about 5-6 years, and then I went to law school and pursued a different career trajectory until I retired. And then once I retired, even though I kept up on climate change, once I had the time, I could kind of dive in. And what I do now is I write a column on climate change for New Mexico's largest paper, which is the Albuquerque Journal. And I write books, including this book, Why Can't We Be More Like Trees? And I work on regional climate projects here in the Southwest.
And you said some of it's with working with water because
With wetlands in particular up in northern New Mexico. Absolutely. As I said, water is so precious if you live in a water scarce area. I mean, it's precious everywhere, but it's every little drop is like a jewel to us here.
Right. Yeah. It's more like I'm on the East Coast and rain is a pretty normal situation out here. And luckily, we have the Finger Lakes and the Great Lakes that keep us hopefully in enough water so there won't be any drought issues, although there have been summers where we've gotten very little rain and it has impacted the farmers.
Oh,
So
for sure.
we've come close, but probably nothing like folks out west where you have water advisories. I know like in California.
Well, I grew up on Lake Superior, and so I was used to never thinking about not having access to enormous amounts of water. So the fact that I've lived in the desert since 1987 is nothing short of a miracle.
So what more? What other things does your book talk about that might be surprising or we didn't understand?
Well, one area is how nature heals us, and not just heals us physically, because we derive so many medicines from plants and trees all over the world, historically and presently. And so that's one thing. But the idea that just walking in the woods, spending time in nature is so healing. And this was first researched by researchers in Japan, and they call it forced bathing, where you just spend time walking in the woods. And they observed, and they did a lot of testing on it, that a number of things happened. People, for one thing, they distressed. The cortisol that are the stress hormones that we carry, those numbers went way down. Anti-cancer cells went up. So it has a very complex chemical reaction. It has to do with those things that we breathe in the woods, the smells that comes from the trees, the things that they're emitting. So that's a significant factor. And then there's more. I mean, we all notice something when we spend time in nature, right? After a while, we just get calmer. And we live in such a complex world right now. And our brains don't always have the time to decompress, but somehow nature just draws us in and helps us to get into a much more calming state. Now, one of the things that happens with time in nature is that the part of our mind, which is the part that we use most of the time, we think of as our thinking mind, our planning mind, the monkey mind, the minds that's always going, right? That part of our mind is, in a way, suppressed, and which means that it's actually receiving less blood flow. And there's another part of our mind called the default mode, which is probably the best way to think about it. It's a more holistic part of our mind. So that comes more into prominence. So we can see things from a more deeper, less fractured perspective. And it's interesting. It's one of the same kind of things happen when people take hallucinogenics and stuff now. They get into a less ego-based state, a state that is more holistic and open. Nature does the same thing.
Well, and I have friends that have studied shamanism from various cultures, and some of them will go out for a day and go sit in a forest and sitting with a tree and just touching in with that energy of a tree. And I don't know if you get into that aspect, but from my reading, one of the exercises was to go out, pick a place, find a tree that you think you'll want to build a relationship with, and then you sit with the tree, like with your back up against it, and just allow your energy to mingle, I guess I'd say, with the tree. And it was really, there was feelings and senses that came from spending that time with one tree. And people might think we're crazy, but it was recorded, and a lot of people said that, you know, they felt something, they maybe had thoughts come in, that they felt the tree was trying to give them some peace and upliftment, or, you know, some positive aspect. And I thought, well, it's really interesting. And I'm going to try to do that this spring or summer, because it's going to be winter here shortly. So it's not going to be conducive too much to go sit out. But I thought that was very interesting. And I've had friends that have done that, and they have reported back that they actually felt that they got a message.
Yeah. I mean, when I talk about, one of the things I talk about in the book is when I was a little kid, I had a special relationship with this oak tree in the woods next to the farm I grew up. I just go there and I would just hang out with my oak tree, and I felt this totally contented, totally safe, totally connected. And now that I am an older adult, I still spend as much time as I can walking in the woods and in nature. I am known to be an avid tree hugger. And if you look scientifically a little bit about what that is about, some studies say that there's a stimulation of the vagus nerve in our system, so that is part of why we might feel some of that deeper connection when we're in nature.
Yeah, so what about when trees, like here in New York, we have the change and the leaves fall, and is there anything going on with that? That it's just the cycle? Should we have awareness of that?
It's always wonderful to have awareness of natural cycles, but of course, when the trees stop photosynthesizing for the year and they drop their leaves and they turn these beautiful colors, even in New Mexico, they turn beautiful colors, probably not as beautiful as where you live, but it's a wonderful time to be in the woods, and just to recognize that this is a part of the natural cycle of life that is so important. And it's an opportunity to pay attention to the seasons and any associations that we might have in our own psyches with that.
Yeah, I know I read a lot, like, you know, be like a tree. You know, there's all those comparisons, allowing, you know, you're beautiful, but then you allow the beauty to go and the leaves come off and you're still standing, and then in the spring you renew, and, you know, you have beautiful leaves that come out. It's here, you know, I don't think everybody, hopefully this goes around the world, but I mean, when the leaves bud out, it's really very pretty here. And when the leaves come to full bloom, it's just such a beautiful green when they all come in the spring.
Yeah, it is. It's just beautiful. And it's sort of so uplifting within our hearts to see that abundance of life. But there's a lot of deeper layers to our story of our relationship with nature and trees. I mean, without trees, this planet, without trees and plants, this planet would be the moon. There would be no soil. There would be no atmosphere. There would be no capacity to support life. From the oxygen we breathe to everything else, all of our food, as humans and all other animals, pretty much comes from plants and trees or other things that eat plants and trees. So we have to begin to look, I think, more deeply into this incredible interconnection we have with all life on the planet. And part of the narratives that I'm talking about in this book is breaking us out of these negative and they are negative because they've led to the climate crisis, these cycles of disconnection and disassociation with nature. Science is definitely leading the way. So is religion, interesting enough. All the major religions are greening, slowly becoming more climate conscious, more environment conscious. And I take that as a great sign and a great opportunity.
What is, like, specifically, like, is one religious group taking a bigger interest in?
Well, sure. Let's look at the 4 major religions, basically, and which maybe 6-7 billion people participate in. Huge numbers of people identify with our 4 major religions. Christianity, Catholicism. This Pope Francis, is a very strong environmentalist, and he's written several treatises for Catholics and Christians and everybody about the climate crisis and about how we need to change our behaviors and about how it is our obligation to care for the earth and to and to be the tenders of this garden that is the earth. In Hinduism, Hindus will kind of believe anyway that everything is alive and interconnected. So for traditional Hindus, it's not a big step. I mean, there are tons of green projects in India and other Hindu countries. Likewise, there are lots of green Muslims in every Islamic country working in groups for climate change. And of course, Buddhism, we know from work of Gary Snyder, Joanna Macy, the whole idea, Thich Nhat Hanh, of engaged Buddhism. So we see these narratives changing, and more people who are people of faith also being strong environmentalists and environmental activists all around the world. It's a huge movement.
All right, well, that's good to know, because I don't attend anywhere in particular, although I was when my children were small, and I was on the environmental committee, and we did things internally at the church, and then we did projects outside, which was nice because part of their philosophy was walk the talk. So if you're talking about environment, then what are you doing about it, as an individual or a group to make a change?
Right. Well, what's really important, I think, in terms of the greening of religions and this idea of new narratives and new stories, is the old religious stories are part of what got us into this mess that said, man has dominion over nature. We're superior to everybody else. We're not interconnected. Go ahead, exploit. So that old story is no longer working, but the new stories are strong and powerful. And if people get behind this mandate that's coming from science, from religion, we can turn this around. And that means that we have a world in which we view ourselves within our world in a much more integrated, holistic manner. We're not separate from, we're a part of, and it's the emerging news story.
Well, yeah, I think when we were children, I mean, you were probably the same as me. You were outside all the time. And, when school was over, it was outside until dinner time or the lights came on.
Right.
And, but we didn't have access to everything like there is now. I mean, we only had a TV. They had 3 channels.
Right.
It was black and white. It wasn't too fancy. So, we would just.
Nature was pretty alluring. That's true.
Right. Yeah. It was a lot more fun. So anything else in the book that, people would read and be surprised, like something we didn't know?
This whole idea of changing stories about who we are in respect to nature, changing narratives. Another part of it is the idea of cooperation and kindness. We see that demonstrated in the tree community. but it's also a part of the human story. Genetically, it seems very likely that cooperation and kindness are actually part of our DNA structure. And there's increasing scientific evidence of that. Of course, we all know what Darwin said, we're just competitive and whatnot, but humans are more cooperative than any other species, in fact. And there's quite a bit of evidence that is coming forward that kindness and caring for others is genetically encoded in us, just like the idea of that we're this deep connection that people have with nature may in fact be genetically encoded in us. And it's called biophilia. And so that to me is a wonderfully exciting concept.
Oh, I've never heard of that before. So
Biophilia,
can you just give me another example of that so I can understand it?
Okay, so it's the idea that innately we feel connected with all things. And there's several books have been written on it, going quite a ways back. And people, for a long time, you had to be kind of careful what you said in the scientific community to get all beat up. But there's a lot more people who are developing stronger evidence that some of these things just may be innate. I mean, if you think about the fact that until 10,000 years ago, people pretty much slept on the ground, they lived in nature, they were hunter-gatherers, and this is a very short period of time. We've strayed into a whole other reality of disconnection. And so we feel lost. Many people feel empty inside, and going back to nature, reconnecting is a way of healing because it might just be a vital part of who we are.
Well, that's true. I mean, when you think about it, our ancestors, however far back you want to go, we didn't have houses. There wasn't, a house just over there. We had to make a house or, use trees and make little lean-tos and that kind of thing. So you had to understand nature and I think I guess I'd refer to like Native Americans. I mean, you use what you had, but you were respectful in your choices and you didn't, you'd live in one area and then move to, find more food or a better area to leave. You left it just as good as you found it. So, and we were sleeping in the dirt, like you said, we were paying attention to our surroundings. We were aware. So, we were maybe a little more hyper aware, I guess.
Perhaps so, yes, because we had to be, right, in many ways. But I'm not suggesting we go back to being hunter-gatherers, but we can relook at some things. The idea of holding respect, like, is so much important part of the indigenous cultures, holding respect for the resources that were given and used. So when we take everything from nature, but if we can hold an attitude of respect and gratitude for what we're being given, rather than treating nature like this giant commodity that's just there for us to grab and take and hoard, which is crazy, but it is an emerging and critically important understanding and a way of reframing our relationship with the natural world.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So that's one of your messages in your book is about relooking at how we are interdependent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And not just on trees and plants, but in everything that comes from everything that's a part of the tree of life. So my book is it's really about holistic thinking in a way, but coming from a very holistic thinking based on what is emerging in science right now. What I keep calling these new narratives that are critical for us to embrace, for us to find our way out of the climate crisis, because and many people are working really hard on this. And there's a lot of really positive things happening. But overall, our viewpoint of ourselves in relationship to the ecological system, the planetary system that we live in, is being radically transformed.
Right. I mean, we were, and probably you too, when those fires were in Canada. There was a couple days here that it was very like smog lake, you know, it looked like kind of foggy, and the sky had kind of an orange tone to it. And I don't think any of us have had any kind of exposure to something like that. So here you're on the end of this, and it's hundreds and thousands of miles away, but yet we're being impacted by it. You know, I can only hope that because of that fire, there's going to be new growth, and that, you know, that it's maybe nature's way. If it was a natural occurrence that lightning strikes and a fire hits.
Well, I mean, it's natural occurrence to start a fire rather than arson and things like that. But the fact is that it's so out of balance, the planet is so out of balance, it's not a natural occurrence. And so we have to take stock of those kinds of situations. I mean, every year we can, in the future now, we can anticipate there's going to be some part of the world that's going to be on fire. And not only does that mean that people are going to be experiencing smoke and the health issues related to smoke, it's the diversity of nature is going to be affected. All those animals are going to be without homes. All those trees that we're taking in carbon are not going to be there. And so it accelerates the entire crisis. And so again, a big rethink is what we need. And I hope that my book is part of that rethink as we right ourselves, as we self-correct in this process that we've allowed to accelerate and happen. And certainly trees, all of the plant community is a big part of that transformation. And so in some ways we need to ally with those natural green allies that we have and work together to bring the planet back into balance. And part of that is like planting tons of trees everywhere, not just millions of trees, but 1 trillion trees is really what we need. And obviously it takes a long time for them to be effective carbon sinks. So that's only part of what we need to do. We need to set aside at least 30% of the planet, the land base and the ocean base, as places that we can't touch and destroy, so the planet can rejuvenate. So we can preserve as much diversity as we can, because ultimately it's not just about us, because we are an intrinsic part of everything else. And so does your book give any, like, point me in the right direction of what I can do? To some degree it does, in terms of what the future might look like. But I read the column that I write, which is called Cutting Your Carbon Footprint. And my website is cuttingyourcarbonfootprint.com. No spaces, has tons of articles on how we individually and households can take actions to do our part in terms of cutting our own carbon footprint. And so those are available on my website, and anybody can download them. Okay. Yeah, because I like, point me in the right direction. Absolutely. And give me some helpful hints so I can think about what I can do. And even if you start small. You start small. You start at your household level. I mean, that's the level where a lot can be changed, whether people are in what kind of cars you drive, how you heat your home, recycling, reuse, all those kinds of things that you've heard probably so much that you tend to think they're not important, but they are important. They're critically important. All right. Well, so let's show me the book again so we can see the book. Okay, here it is. It is called Why Can't We Be More Like Trees? The Ancient Masters of Cooperation, Kindness, and Healing. It's published by Inner Traditions. It just came out about a week or so ago. You can order it from anywhere now. So that is exciting to me. Well, of course. And
It sounds like it has a lot of great information.
It has a lot of great information, and it is a carefully scientifically researched book that really blends what's happening in terms of our spiritual selves, different world religions, and what the scientific community is telling us in terms of these are the new stories. These are our new narratives that we need to address. This is who we are now. And the old stories, they don't work anymore. They got us to this mess. So the other thing I wanted to say is, once again, go to my website, which is cuttingyourcarbonfootprint.com. And you'll find a lot of articles. You'll find information on this book and other books, and also a lot of articles that you can read or download on things individuals and households can do and need to be aware of in terms of the larger climate crisis.
All right. Well, this is great information. I'm excited that I was early on when the book just came out, so that's great. So Intertraditions is one of the locations that has her book.
Intertraditions, they're the publisher. I mean, you can get ordered from Amazon. You can order it from your local bookstore or wherever you tend to get books now that it's out.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time. I thank you very much. And I can't wait to learn more myself. So
okay, well,
I like it when people do good work. So yay.
Thank you for having me on your program. I much appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. I'm going to hit the button